Okay. Hello and welcome to the October 2021 version of the Nonprofit Network. This is a series of programming put together by the Park County Community Foundation to help support our local nonprofits in being more effective in their mission. Today, we are joined by Julie Rhoda, who is going to be speaking on the topic of looking closely shouldn't be spooky, which is our Halloween themed version of the how and why of doing an organizational assessment. Some of you may have heard from Julie before when she was able to be with us in person. She has presented on grant writing and on strategic planning. Julie is a consultant in the nonprofit sector with several decades of experience, both hands-on and in leadership coaching. And she has helped organizations consistently raise more money and achieve greater mission impact and even have a little fun in the process. So we're hoping that we can deliver both fun and knowledge for you this afternoon. Julie's going to be running through the slides, and feel free to ask questions as they arise, or you can also put the question in the chat line and I will interrupt Julie as appropriate. So thanks so much to everyone for being here, and Julie, take it away.
So thank you so much, Barb, and thank you everyone in the Livingston area there who's joined, and from afar, if you're not in Livingston. Let's see if I can get this to work. We were running through a little bit of troubles earlier. So when we say having a little fun in the process, Zoom calls generally aren't real fun, and they can be a little different because we're not interfacing the same, but absolutely feel free to drop comments in the chat and questions, because I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. It's not a super long presentation because this is going to be pretty much an intro, height 30,000 foot elevation thing, if we want to call it that. And so let me see if I can get this to go now. There we go. Okay, so there's our very first colorful slide. When we use the word assessment, it can strike a little bit of fear factor because, in all honesty, most of us haven't gone through assessments. And if we did, it might have been a performance assessment at work, and we were a little nervous about how that would turn out. So when we talk about assessment for our organization, then it shouldn't be fearful. And actually, it should be something we really want to embrace. And so after I've gone through this with various organizations, they are more likely to do it again because they enjoyed the process. So today we have three main points that we hope that you can take away with you. And that would be these three here. I'm going to move my slide sorter. So a little bit more clarity as to why your organization would need to engage in a deep dive from time to time. Second one, effective arguments for including an assessment as part of your strategic goal setting process. Some of you have a little bit more sway in making an assessment possible, okay? And greater understanding of how assessment results have power, and they bring purpose and clarity to the decision-making process, and really how this can help your organization thrive, okay? So, I was telling Barb when I went to do this that I grew up with a father who took me to car shows endlessly. Actually, he did air shows as well. And the fascinating thing about car shows is you can see different kind of people walking around and what they're really interested in. Some of those are the ones that put their head under the hood immediately, and the other ones are walking around and really looking at that curb appeal. And I thought maybe we can transition this a little bit into our nonprofit sector here. Those I show here looking under the hood, having a conversation, talking about how are things running? Does it need a tune-up? Do we have regular maintenance scheduled? This is our organization now. Are we just driving down the road? Are we just coming every day and doing our work and not really considering all the other things that go into this? Are our finances in a good position if something should break? Okay, and then we have this one. What about our curb appeal? And I'm not sure. Is moving my deck thing here with our view? Is that showing up?
It showed the slide, but it's only showing the top bullet point at this point.
Okay, very good. I wasn't sure how my movement of the window here was going. Okay, does our community recognize our missional vehicle? So when I say that, I'm talking about our programs and services. Does the media showcase our work from time to time? You ever notice that some organizations get more media time than others? How is that happening? Why does that happen? So why or why not? Where do we shine? What are we known for? Where could we improve? Okay, so as you guys get into this, you might understand different viewpoints bring different things to the table. So assessment findings actually bring clarity for the various participants. And if you had to say, where would you say your board lands, for instance, in the running well or over the curb appeal? Where would you say the staff lands in the segmentation? Can you see where it might present challenges for understanding or prioritizing your efforts? You know, our board and staff often have very differing views on how things are running. Boards tend to be very fiduciary, as is necessary, but not always. And it depends if the board is a hands-on volunteer board, if there's not very many staff. So they might have a different set of viewpoints about how an organization is functioning. Staff, on the other hand, would be the first ones who interface with the clients, if you have clients that are human beings and or put in the blank there. We talk about clients when we provide services, but not all of our organizations are working directly with people. So in terms of that, boards tend to be naturally more distant from the day-to-day comments the staff might hear from our clients. I put that in parentheses when I say that. Our end users, those who benefit from our services. And then our executive director is someone who is in between both groups and doing the management of helping the staff see the board's vision and helping the board see the staff's vision and if not vision, their heart for serving, and where they tend to be the gatekeeper. So assessment is a process we'll talk about that helps bring the various ideas and the various insights to the table at the same time in a way that is cohesive to having great discussions with less drama and having honest conversations about the health of our organization. Okay, so that is where I was going with this statement here. I got a little ahead of myself, but you can see where it is. The assessment is used to have the honest conversations. So I put this slide in because I think these 6 points fall into the assessment process really well. The assessment really helps you identify quickly what areas in your organization can improve. So part of the assessment is that we gather facts, okay? From the facts, then we brainstorm. We talk about the pros and cons of our organization. We make decisions about the comments and the ideas that have come forth. We provide some follow through. What do you do with the decisions? And then from there, you need to define and clarify further where you're going with the information that you've gathered, how it's implemented, and what change that takes place from it. So this process, oops, I got a little too far. This process really helps everyone voice their thoughts, understand one another's points of views, clearly prioritize what needs improving. So we can go from there. Okay. So This is our textbook definition of what an organizational assessment is. It really does measure and benchmark success. So as you can see there, the goal of an assessment is to collect the data that can help the nonprofit evaluate whether or not it's making progress towards various goals, including whether it can demonstrate it's making progress advancing its mission. I like the term advancing our mission. We can fulfill our mission. That's what we should be doing every day if we can, but whether or not we're advancing it, that it is making a collective impact for change for the reason why it was formed in the first place. So this is a touchstone here about organizational assessments, what they do. And data collection, I'm just going to talk about that for a minute. Not all of us get excited about data collection. So data collection might feel like a really sterile term, but I want you to understand that when we can gather clear, objective answers in our assessment questions, it can provide vibrant data. That's data that we can get like an emotional, just wrap our arms around and understand. This vibrant data represents the varied experiences of everyone who's a player in the organization who takes part in the assessment and brings it in for a really thoughtful consideration. So data doesn't have to be sterile. Data can have emotional context. It can have purposeful context, and it can have, it's not just a spreadsheet. This is the input we're getting from people we work with and who care about our organization. Okay, so things that we'll discover when you engage an assessment process. I put 5 different things up here. The board doesn't always want to take a self-assessment, but in a general context of a organizational assessment, you will find out all of these things. More specific assessments into different areas of an organization will reveal different things. So if you folks can just take a look at those bullet points there in the color. One of the things that I run into quite a bit when I do assessments are the one at the top center. Whether or not a program is still really effective, whether it's advancing the mission or it's something that's just keeping everyone busy. We've done it a long time. Whether or not retiring a program is a good idea, that can come out of assessment. And very seriously, the one about what our leaders feel are priorities. That's really important. If we don't prioritize our work, we can have a really full plate that's not, and it keeps us very busy, but it might not be as impactful as setting 1 or 2 priorities, really chasing after the priorities, and then watching the entire organization come to better health because we did focus on 1 or 2 priorities. Okay, samples of types of assessments. This actually could be an entire training all in itself, but in terms of what we're talking about today, what I wanted to provide was a little bit of information that there are different types of assessments. So the ones that I undertake most frequently would be an organizational assessment. And it's often used as a benchmarking tool, and it's often used, or I really encourage it to be used before a strategic planning is going to set like 3 to 5 year goals. And the reason for that is because it's really difficult to achieve strategic goals if we haven't undertaken the reality of where we're at now. So then another one is program performance assessments. That's for evaluating or maybe even setting evaluation parameters into programs if we haven't had them before. Financial and fundraising assessments, how are we doing there? Staffing assessments, what are the needs? What do we have? What are the skills? What might we need to add? Community awareness and marketing, emergency preparedness. There is an endless number of types types of assessment. So what I want you to keep in mind is that Park County Community Foundation has determined this year that they might want to do a deeper dive into this topic of assessments. And so I'm sure Barbara would really appreciate your feedback today on what information would be really helpful to you. And then to stay tuned in terms of what is going to be on deck in spring for your organization to grow in their understanding. Okay, and I did switch the order here, Barb, because I thought this was a better order. How hard or easy are assessments? And there's a lot of options. There truly are a lot of options. And so in general, you want as broad a representation of thoughts and opinions and information coming in. So you can do an online survey. You want key parties. So key parties would be board members, staff members, volunteers, various persons like that. And so you can do an online survey, and that's a really nice method. Sets of printed questionnaires that are distributed to the participants. I put board and staff. Do-it-yourself version, hire someone to help you with it. And that falls a lot into the same idea of like strategic planning. Is this something we're going to do in-house? Are we going to have a facilitator? What might be best for that? So there's a lot of options, and the options really do range, as it says here, from simple and straightforward to very complex. So the problem that we get into a little bit, just a little things to keep in mind, is no matter what option you choose, it really should not be scary, okay? Where there might be, you know, a little drama in the office from time to time, drama is really actually pretty much eliminated when you gather objective answers to specific questions. And because it sets it in a different context. People have to really think deeply about what they're answering and why. And I think that there's a little bit more compassion and understanding when we start reading through answers that are anonymous to see another person's viewpoint. Okay. I'm going to touch briefly on the options here, just so you understand the complexity of what might be involved. The first one about the online surveys are really easy to engage. They are really the most simple in terms of completion rates and somebody in their own time being able to do it. But then, as you can imagine, there's a need to compile the results. So who's assigned to do that? Who's going to take on that task? And is it the board chair? Is it the ED? Is it a staff member that's asked to do it? And then how subjective might their viewpoint be going through the answers and compiling where things fall? Because it's not always cut and dried. And people do have open-ended questions. If it's a good assessment questionnaire, it's going to have open-ended questions and comments. And so it really helps to have an objective, somebody outside. I'm going to say, just, you know, raising my hand here, having done this a number of times, depending on the complexity of your organization, it can really help to have somebody who is not embedded in the outcomes of the answers, compiling the data and creating a report about how important and prioritizing things. The second one of the questionnaires, just in from a logistic point, we aren't necessarily printing as much paper anymore, so that isn't as necessary. But if that seems to be the way to go, and you distribute them, then becomes the problem. Who's collecting them? How do you track them all down? And unless you have this done at a board meeting or a special staff meeting, you run into challenges of just gathering the completed questionnaires. Been there and done that. There's the do-it-yourself versions. They're obviously free, and then there are many options there for finding someone who can help you do your assessment, that will take all of the information, have the questions formatted, assign the persons to take it, send the links, gather the results, and take it from there. So you can see whatever works for your organization and what your budget might be, and endless questions there, okay? So now we get to when we might do an assessment. And so, Barb, did you actually want to do the poll at this point, or no? We actually missed a poll question.
Sure, we have the 2 polls. I think I just need to do them in order. So
Okay,
I'll just do these right quick. So the first poll is, what is your primary role at your nonprofit organization? And I know many of you are involved with multiple organizations. So feel free to answer based on whatever hat you're wearing for today's webinar. So I'm going to leave this up for just a few moments. And then the next poll is just, has your organization done an assessment before? Do you want to do that right away, Julie?
sure, that would help.
Okay.
That would help me know whether or not, I can do a little bit more deeper dive, or to keep it interesting. If nobody's really gone through it, or very few have gone through it, then I want to make sure that we keep it in a format that people will understand.
Okay, so it looks like we have 3 executive directors, 3 program directors, make that 4, 1 communications lead, 1 person in multiple roles, and 1 person who is a board member. I'm closing the poll. And okay. I don't actually do a ton of polls, people, so this is me trying to stay up to date. So that's what we see, the poll results. I'm going to stop sharing that and see if I can do poll number 2. Yeah, no, not so much with, here we go. All right, poll number 2. Has your organization previously completed an assessment? Wow, we got 1. 1 person has. Okay, so with 80% of the vote calculated, we have 1 person who has and 8 people who have not. So that's your audience, Julie. Carry on.
All right. All right.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
No problem. And that actually doesn't surprise me at all. I often get called far more frequently to help with the strategic planning or help with fundraising than to help with an assessment. And the interesting thing is the assessment speaks into almost any decision you might want to be taking with your nonprofit. So we still have that up there. Let me see if I can close that. There we go. So here are some samples of, we went through some really basic information about assessments there. This is like assessment 101. What is an assessment? So samples of when you should do an assessment. Okay. Let's see if I can get that to go. When is it most important to gather the data? This would be really great if we all did this, but it doesn't happen really frequently, as you've just attested. Prior to undertaking new program endeavors. Okay. Prior to doing strategic planning. Why might that be important? Oh, well, we talked about that a little bit, in the sense that it's really hard. We can get really, really visionary with strategic planning, but if we don't know what we don't know, right? There's that saying that says you don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. Little redundant, but it's still true. Let's say that, and I don't want to pick on boards. I've served on a number of boards, but the board and the executive director and sometimes some staff members, but generally that's the group. It does the strategic planning. It sets some really large goals, but hasn't figured exactly how we're going to get there, or taken an assessment of what our finances look like and what it would need to get from point A to point B. So when you want to set priority for the coming year's focus that everyone can agree on, when it seems like answering the immediate problem has become the norm. So there's that saying, especially in organizations that deal in safety net, we call safety net organizations, where people tend to be in crisis when they walk through the door. When you work in an organization like that, it is not uncommon that the important things often don't get done because you always have someone in crisis at your desk. And so answering the immediate becomes more important than doing the important, which might be some of the longer term things. And that's really a difficult balance. But when that becomes the norm month after month, then it's time to really assess, where are we at? Do we need to fix some things? And where are our strengths and our weaknesses when it comes to that? Okay, when there appears to have been mission drift. A couple of years ago, this was a topic that was brought up a lot. But if we do have mission drift and we're really married to what the new things are, then we may need to change our mission and may need to look at that. So when funding is repeatedly falling short, that's another time that you need to be aware of what kind of data do we need to gather. Okay, and why is it important to know these things? If we don't really know how our current programs are fulfilling our mission, why would we engage more of them? Okay, uncertainty is never the best foot to step forward on. All right, and I need to talk a little bit about strategic goals that aren't rooted in our current reality. If we don't know what our current reality is based upon facts and data, then it can make it really impossible to fulfill strategic goals. And I'm not sure how many of you, if you could raise your hand and see, wave, how many have had strategic plans that were charged to the organization to fulfill, and you just felt like there's no way we can do this. It's not based in reality, and it's demoralizing might be too strong of a word, but when this happens time after time, organizations tend to just stop doing strategic plans. And that's not a good answer either. We can have really great strategic plans, but they really need to be based in reality and then have achievable goals. And when we have plans like that, people are much happier and our clients are happier. Okay, so leading from that position of informed strength and understanding helps everyone get on board, which is what I just talked about. That truly is when people feel like they're heard and understood, and we have reasonable goals and we can achieve them, because who really wants to beat themselves up going to work every day doing something that is impossible? And then when we know all of these things and we're heading towards a really informed trajectory, then fundraising for our mission is easier because we're being very clear about what we're doing. Okay, so you might have questions about how are these assessment questions done? What do they look like? Assessment questions that are formatted really well are formatted in such a way that people have to think about them. It's not a yes, no. And the important thing to know is when we get into this, there's a lot of opinions in a room. And we each do get our own opinions, but in the end, we don't each get our own facts. So the facts need to speak. And when we frame the questions in an honest way to gather objective feedback, then the answers really do inform what we need. And like I said here, they're worth their weight in gold. So I have a couple samples so that you can see what I'm talking about. Intelligent questions, excellent framework. Okay, so under a sample question about vision and goals from an assessment, this is written: Organization has a written vision and or mission statement, which is up to date and used to guide us in a choice of activities. Could we answer yes or no? Yes, but we actually have a different framework for that. This is what they say, why we ask. Mission and vision statements help the organization focus on what it should do among all the various possibilities. They also help to attract and recruit new members, volunteers, and board members. Can you see where the framing of why they're asking the question might make you answer a little bit more carefully? So then this particular assessment uses a choice grid from very strongly agree to very strongly disagree. So you can say, I really strongly agree that our organization's vision mission statement is up to date and it guides all of our activities. Well, that might be something a board member might answer, I strongly agree, and yet a staff member who's carrying out day-to-day activities really isn't seeing how it aligns. They might put, I strongly disagree. So then what happens? There's room for open-ended comments. But I'm going to get to the next question so you have an idea on that as well. Here's an evaluation survey question. It's about evaluating, obviously, board staff and other important participants got together and honestly evaluated the organization's performance during the past year. Why we ask. Annual evaluations of the organization's performance or opportunity. So you can read that. And then again, how strongly. So the point of these questions, and these ones were taken directly from a survey type of benchmarking, organizational benchmarking assessment, is from the Institute for Conservation Leadership. And they have some really great brain science behind the questions they ask. So these don't really get the objective answers written out form, but what they do then is at the end of each section, there is open-ended comments that people really do enjoy answering. So right now, what we do well in planning and monitoring campaigns and programs. Let's look at our highlights. Let's celebrate what we're doing well. Let's list out what they are. We should be able to identify these things. And then the second part would be greatest challenges we face in planning, monitoring our programs and campaigns. So it takes a moment. We have to pause. We have to think. We remember that while our answers are anonymous, we do want to provide feedback that is heartfelt and gets into the nitty-gritty. And different roles in the organization will answer this differently, not necessarily at tremendous odds, but from a slightly different view. And so when we pull all these views together, we can all go, oh, I didn't realize that. Well, maybe this is or that is. And it gives us a moment's pause to really consider someone else and consider what their thoughts and ideas are. Okay. So the value of everyone's input. I don't know, have there been any chat questions that arose yet?
No questions. Oh,
okay. Well, then I guess we're going to keep going. The value of everyone's input. And I really do hope, no matter what your role is in your organization, that you feel like you're seen and heard. It is so important. There's times where I come in and work with organizations in development to make sure that that's taking place, because we can't always pay our staff members well, but when our staff members are valued, they tend to stay. And so that's really an important thing too. And that goes for board members as well. Not that they're getting paid, but they want to be valued for the skills they bring to the table and that they have jobs that are worthy of the time that they're investing. So that's really important. So in an assessment, who participates? So I always encourage, when I come to a group and they've asked me to help the key staff. So depending on the size of your organization, that might be one person. It might be an executive director who's also the program person and also the fundraiser and whatever. If the organization is larger, then it should be the heads of the various departments, if we have departments. And so that would then go on and include board members. One of the really fun ones I did about 3 years ago had some past board members. The organization was reframing itself a little bit, and they brought in a couple of the founding. It was only like a 10-year-old organization. They brought in some of the founding members to participate. They also brought in volunteers, and so volunteers can be very valuable to an assessment, especially if you have a lot of your program delivery is based on volunteer hours. The ones that come to mind, libraries often use a lot of volunteers. The other ones are food banks, things that help. Again, safety net organizations often rely heavily on volunteers. Animal shelters. It's endless. Everyone has a different type of service delivery, and I know COVID greatly impacted the ability for volunteers in various roles, but it's important to remember in the life of your organization, if you do have volunteers, to include them in an assessment because they bring such a valuable insight. They see things that we don't as staff. They see things we don't as board. And they do honestly often represent that community feedback that we might be missing otherwise, because they are volunteering at our organization, but they are probably also very active in our community. So that can really help. Let me see, I'm gonna check my notes real quickly. So one of the things that I found interesting, and I'll just talk about it right here, because how these findings really are reflected, or the comments are reflected from these various roles. So each role within the organization has such a unique and valuable viewpoint when they answer these questions. So I'm just gonna give you some feedback from one I did a while ago. And actually, yeah, I think so. So under the topic that came up in the assessment about staffing levels, there was a great question and series of questions. And then these answers formed from the survey helped me form some ideas about what was going on. So here was an answer. It says, we have had a reliable and committed work team for a few years now, and we've provided training and resources to help our team members succeed. Okay. Second answer, there is genuine interest in finding ways to guide, mentor, educate, and provide opportunities for our staff. So that was probably an ED or a board member. Counterpoint answers to that same question were, the technology troubles with computers, a printer, copier, or lower pay and no benefits are hard. I like my job, but struggle to stay. So there was a couple other things. There was very diverse views on staff training, staff opportunities, and various other things. When I wrote my report, I put in, while there was confidence that the organization has the expertise needed to carry out its programs, this area of the survey was noted by 50% of respondents as needing attention right now. From interviews with individuals within the survey respondents, this reflects concern about the consistent growth in clientele without a correlating growth in staffing with expertise. So that's just an insight into some of the information that might come out, but you can see from the way that people wrote their answers They were taking care with their answers. So it wasn't a quick yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Although I don't know should be an option when you get these various roles. Taking a survey, staff members might not know anything about the board meetings. Volunteers might not know anything about fiduciary issues. And so not applicable or don't know is a great answer to keep in there. Okay, moving on. So what to do with the findings? That's a really great question. So once we get all the answers and we get a report compiled and we go through it, then what do we do with it? The answer is really going to depend for you personally on what your role with the organization is. So if you're a board member, you're going to want to take these findings and you're going to want to make sure that you implement change where change is needed. So a really great measure in an assessment, because everything that we ask questions on in an assessment is important. All of these things especially in a organizational assessment, everything they ask questions on are important things. But the question then remains after that, is this important now? So then we get to prioritize. And not everything should be a priority immediately, although sometimes we are a little bit messy and we don't want to bite off too much at once, but picking 1, 2, or 3 things, depending on the capacity of your organization, to work on improving is a good idea. And that's where you can start building that into goals. But as a staff member, obviously, then if you see the results, and hopefully you're invited to hear the results, you may be tasked with doing certain parts of those things that help improve the organization. As an ED, you're probably going to land right in the middle of being charged by the board to accomplish things, and then working with your staff members to make sure that everybody understands why, and taking it from there. And then, of course, reporting back to the board on those things that are taking place. Okay, so this slide here, which is really not able to be seen on the screen, is a true gem that is provided by Joan Gary in her Leadership Lab materials. And Barb has made this available on the Park County Community Foundation website. And it is a basis for kind of digging into where our organization is. So it has these different things down. Yes?
I just posted the link in the chat.
Oh, excellent.
If folks want to click on it so that you can download a version that's visible. Yes.
Yes. I tried really hard, but unless I broke it up into like 5 sections, it wasn't going to happen. And we didn't want to spend a really long time on this. Basically, there's 5 different things: people, money, program, narrative of our organization, and strategies. And then it goes into various things. And we can kind of gauge where we're at. Are we a messy organization? Are we a growing organization? Are we healthy? Are we thriving? And, you might not fall all straight down in one column. You might actually have a meandering path through this chart, but this really is 14 really clear attributes of a healthy nonprofit. And if you find yourself in the messy column a lot, don't fear. There's room for improvement. You can only go up, right? And I would encourage you that if you can download this and make sure that your ED gets it, it's really a great tool to measure things, okay?
Apparently I put the link in the wrong place, but now it should be visible.
Okay. Okay, so, and I did touch on this. Findings from your assessment are going to inform your priorities for the year, your annual plan budgeting, because in order to improve some areas, it might cost you money, areas for improving your services. So that's all really important stuff. So when I did the findings on the one, I used the client I used as a sample there. I gave them 3 things that I found as priorities that they should be working on. And the first one was staffing, because they were expanding their programs. They had just literally thousands upon thousands of clients, and they didn't have enough staffing and the correlating financial impact. So the first one was staffing. The second thing they needed to work on was fundraising, because they were going to have a greater burden to pay their staff. And then the third one was board development. And they decided that their board was going to start meeting instead of every month, their board was going to meet every other month, and their off months, their board was going to dig into the power of committee work and get more done outside of the regular board meetings. The reason why they did that, and it's not unique just to their organization, was because their board members in the survey had voiced that they didn't feel their skills were being utilized. One of the greatest reasons for board member attrition is board members are bored. They're not being really tapped for what things they bring to the table, and they get tired of going to meetings. So I think we can all relate to that. So then the question arises from this: assessment can actually lessen the load if results are incorporated into the annual plan. So when you prioritize, then the other things can pretty much take back seat on the table. And when there's the saying that when tide, all boats rise with the tide, if you can improve one area of your nonprofit, the other areas start naturally improving as well. And if you get one thing really fixed, then you'll have time to work on the other things. And so, of course, this is all while you're doing your regular day-to-day things. But the improvements will give some really specific tasks, so that you can feel like there's a tangible reason why you're doing the things you're doing. It is going to end up improving everything. So as I put in the second part of this slide, referring to the assessment results helps everyone remember why you prioritize things the way you did. And that's what comes out of those conversations and those comments, is a greater understanding of why these diverse ideas matter, why the diverse, very objective opinions matter, and why we prioritize that this was more important than the thing I thought was important when I started the process. So hopefully that helps you understand those things and relieves a little bit of the fear about why you might do this and how it can help your organization. Assessments really are one of the least utilized tools by nonprofits. And truly, I often would encourage people, don't do strategic planning every year. Do make an annual plan, but alternate between strategic planning and assessment from year to year. Your organization will move way up the chart of the 14 healthy attributes that we showed, and it will honestly have far more cohesive thinking between all the various roles and responsibilities in the organization. It is such a great tool for bringing consensus to a thought process about why we're doing what we're doing and why is it important.